In the dark waters of the Pacific Ocean, beneath thousands of feet of pressure, a steel tomb rests silently, holding the remains of 80 American sailors. For 75 years, their families waited for answers. This is the story of USS Grayback SS-208, one of America's most successful submarines of World War II, and the remarkable journey to bring her crew home. On April 3, 1940, at the Electric Boat Company in Groton, Connecticut, the keel was laid for a new submarine that would bear the name Grayback. Named after the lake herring, this Tambor-class submarine was part of America's rapid naval expansion as war clouds gathered. The year was 1940 and Europe was already engulfed in flames. Hitler's armies had swept across Poland, Denmark, Norway, and France. In the Pacific, Japan's imperial ambitions grew more aggressive each month. American military planners knew it was only a matter of time. The United States needed submarines, and it needed them quickly. The Tambor class represented a significant leap in submarine design. At 307 feet long and 27 feet wide, Grayback displaced 470 tons when surfaced. She could reach speeds of just over 20 knots on the surface and nearly 9 knots when submerged. Her armament was formidable for her time. 10 torpedo tubes, 6 facing forward and 4 aft, a 3-inch deck gun mounted forward of the conning tower, and additional anti-aircraft weapons that would be added as the war progressed. On January 31, 1941, Grayback slid down the ways, christened by Mrs. Wilson Brown, wife of Rear Admiral Wilson Brown, the superintendent of the Naval Academy. On June 30, 1941, USS Grayback was commissioned. Lieutenant Willard A. Saunders took command of the new submarine and began the crucial process of working up the crew. Through the summer and fall of 1941, Grayback conducted shakedown cruises, operating out of Newport, New London, and New York. The crew learned their submarine intimately. Every valve, every gauge, every sound she made, in the confined steel tube that would be their home and their weapon. They trained relentlessly for the war everyone knew was coming, but no one could predict how soon. On December 7, 1941, the world changed. Japanese aircraft struck Pearl Harbor without warning, sinking or damaging 8 battleships and killing over 2,400 Americans. President Roosevelt called it a date that would live in infamy. America was at war, and USS Grayback would soon be in the fight. On January 12, 1942, Grayback departed New London. Heading west through the Panama Canal to the Pacific, she arrived at Pearl Harbor on February 8, 1942. The harbor was still being cleaned up from the devastating attack. Burned and capsized ships littered the waters. Oil still leaked from the sunken USS Arizona. For the crew of Grayback, seeing Pearl Harbor's destruction made the war suddenly terribly real. Just 1 week later, on February 15, 1942, Grayback departed on her first war patrol. Her destination, the waters around Saipan and Guam, Japanese-controlled territory in the Mariana Islands. The patrol would last 55 days. 55 days of tension, danger, and deadly cat-and-mouse games. On February 22, just 1 week into the patrol, Grayback had her first encounter with the enemy. But it wasn't what anyone expected. An enemy submarine, a Japanese I-boat, spotted Grayback and fired 2 torpedoes at her. The hunter had become the hunted. For 4 agonizing days, the 2 submarines played a deadly game. The Japanese boat would appear, fire, then disappear. Grayback's crew spotted the enemy conning tower several times. Once, the Japanese submarine actually broached, breaking the surface. But Grayback couldn't maneuver into position for a counterattack. The stress on the crew was enormous, never knowing when the next torpedo might come, unable to fight back effectively. Finally, after 4 nerve-wracking days, Grayback shook her pursuer and continued her patrol. First blood came on March 17, 1942. Grayback sank a 3,291-ton cargo ship off Port Lloyd, her first kill. The crew had proven themselves in combat, but they also learned a harsh lesson. Submarine warfare in the Pacific would be unlike anything they had trained for. Grayback returned to Pearl Harbor on April 10, 1942. Her first patrol had been moderately successful. 1 ship sunk, valuable intelligence gathered, and the crew had gained their first taste of combat. But in the submarine service, there was little time for rest. After a brief refit, Grayback headed out on her second patrol. This time her destination was Fremantle, Western Australia. It would become her home base for much of the war. The journey to Australia was uneventful. No enemy vessels encountered. But this was the nature of submarine warfare. Long periods of tedium punctuated by moments of stark terror. The third and fourth patrols tested the crew's resolve. Operating in the South China Sea and around the Solomon Islands, Grayback faced frustrating conditions. Bright tropical moonlight made surprise attacks nearly impossible. Shallow waters with treacherous reefs threatened to run them aground, and aggressive Japanese patrol craft hunted them relentlessly. Despite these hazards, Grayback damaged several enemy freighters, and even got a shot at another Japanese submarine. More importantly, her presence in these waters, along with other American submarines, tied up Japanese escorts and threatened their supply lines. This contribution, though not always visible in ships sunk, was crucial to the success of the Guadalcanal campaign, America's first major offensive in the Pacific. Grayback's Fifth War Patrol began on December 7, 1942, exactly 1 year after Pearl Harbor. Departing from Australia, the submarine headed back into combat zones. But this patrol would be remembered for something extraordinary, something that had nothing to do with sinking ships. Just 1 week out of port on December 13th, a crew member named Darrell Dean Rector developed severe abdominal pain. His appendix was infected and about to burst. In a hospital, this would be routine surgery. But Grayback was 100 feet beneath the Pacific Ocean, thousands of miles from the nearest surgeon. Without an operation, Rector would die. The responsibility fell to pharmacist mate Harry B. Roby. Roby had never performed surgery. He had no surgical instruments, no operating room. Just a medical manual, improvised tools, and determination. In the cramped officer's wardroom, with the submarine running deep to avoid detection, Roby operated on his shipmate. Other crew members assisted, holding flashlights and passing instruments. The operation took over 2 hours. When it was over, Roby had successfully removed the infected appendix. Darrell Rector survived. By the end of the patrol, he was back standing watch. It was only the second emergency appendectomy ever performed on a submerged submarine. This patrol yielded more than just a medical miracle. On Christmas Day 1942, Grayback surfaced and sank 4 Japanese landing barges with her deck gun. 4 days later, another enemy submarine fired at her, but Grayback maneuvered to avoid the torpedoes. Then on January 3, 1943, Grayback achieved something remarkable. She sank the Japanese submarine I-18. Submarine versus submarine combat was extremely rare in World War II. Only 25 Japanese submarines were destroyed by Allied submarines. Grayback had claimed one of them. 2 days after sinking I-18, on January 5, 1943, Grayback received an urgent radio message. 6 American airmen were stranded on an island near Munda Bay. Their B-26 Marauder bomber had been shot down. They were hiding from Japanese patrols, desperately hoping for rescue. The mission was dangerous. Munda Bay was heavily defended Japanese territory. Approaching the island meant risking the submarine and all 65 crew members. For 6 men they'd never met. Commander Edward C. Stephan, Grayback's captain, didn't hesitate. Grayback would attempt the rescue. On the night of January 5th, under cover of darkness, Grayback surfaced near the island. 2 volunteer submariners, motor machinist's mate First Class John P. O'Brien, and gunner's mate Second Class Robert E. Doherty, went ashore in a small rubber boat. Meanwhile, Grayback submerged to avoid detection. The crew waited tensely beneath the surface, not knowing if their shipmates would return. Hours passed. That night, Grayback surfaced again. Out of the darkness came the small boat. O'Brien and Doherty had found all 6 airmen. They brought them safely back to the submarine. The rescue was a complete success. Commander Stephan was awarded the Navy Cross. For this daring rescue, it was a reminder that submarine warfare wasn't just about sinking ships. It was about courage, sacrifice, and never leaving anyone behind. By September 1943, American submarine tactics were evolving. The Germans had proven the effectiveness of submarine wolf packs. Multiple submarines working together to overwhelm convoy defenses. Now the U.S. Navy would adopt the same strategy. Grayback arrived at Pearl Harbor on September 12, 1943, to prepare for her 8th war patrol. This time would be different. On September 26th, Grayback departed with USS Shad. At Midway, they rendezvoused with USS Cerro, under the command of Captain Charles B. Momsen in Cerro. This would be the first American submarine wolfpack. The 3 submarines cruised the China Sea as a coordinated unit, sharing intelligence, coordinating attacks. When one submarine spotted a convoy, all 3 could converge. The Japanese didn't know what hit them. On October 14th, Grayback torpedoed and sank the fleet tanker Kozui Maru. 8 days later, on October 22nd, She executed a perfect end-around run on a fast convoy, sinking the transport Owata Maru. Then came October 27th. Shad had attacked a convoy and damaged a 9,000-ton transport. The ship was listing badly but still afloat. Grayback closed in and delivered the coup de grace. 2 torpedoes sent the transport to the bottom. By the time they returned to Midway on November 10th, the 3 submarines had expended all their torpedoes. They claimed 38,000 tons sunk and 63 to 300 tons damaged. The Wolfpack concept had proven devastatingly effective. Grayback's 9th War Patrol would be her most successful. Departing Pearl Harbor in November 1943, she headed for the East China Sea. Her hunting grounds would be the waters near Okinawa, Japanese-controlled territory teeming with enemy shipping. Throughout November and December, Grayback wreaked havoc. She sank 4 freighters in rapid succession, a sampan fishing boat, and a patrol vessel. She also damaged another freighter. But the crown jewel came on December 18, 1943. Grayback detected a Japanese destroyer, the Numikaze near Okinawa. Destroyers were prized targets for submarines. They were fast, heavily armed, and designed specifically to hunt and kill submarines. Sinking one was extremely difficult and dangerous. Grayback maneuvered into attack position. She fired a spread of torpedoes. The weapons ran hot, straight, and normal. Explosions ripped through Numikaze. The destroyer sank within minutes. Grayback had destroyed a major enemy warship. By the time she returned to Pearl Harbor, Grayback's reputation as one of the most successful submarines in the Pacific Fleet was firmly established. January 28, 1944 dawned clear and cold at Pearl Harbor. USS Grayback prepared to depart on her 10th War Patrol. Commander John Anderson Moore was in command, a respected officer known for conservative damage estimates and careful methodical tactics. The crew numbered 80 men, young sailors and experience. Most were in their early 20s, far from home. They represented every corner of America: farm boys from the Midwest, factory workers from the industrial Northeast, sons of immigrants who had found opportunity in the United States Navy. Each had volunteered for submarine duty, knowing the risks. Submarines had the highest casualty rate of any branch in the Navy. 1 in 5 submariners would not return, but these men were elite sailors, confident in their training, in their equipment, and in each other. As Grayback slipped away from the pier that January morning, families waved goodbye from the shore. Some had traveled thousands of miles for one last glimpse. Wives, mothers, girlfriends, children. They knew it might be months before they heard from their loved ones. Radio silence was standard procedure for submarines on patrol. What they didn't know was that for many of them, this would be the last time they would ever see their husbands, sons, and fathers. Grayback's mission for her 10th patrol was straightforward. Proceed to the East China Sea and hunt Japanese shipping. Interdict supply lines running between Japan and the occupied territories, and create as much chaos as possible in enemy waters. It was the same mission she had executed successfully 9 times before. For the first month, Grayback's patrol proceeded according to plan. On February 19, 1944, she reported sinking 2 cargo vessels, the Tateyama Maru and the Toshin Maru, combined tonnage over 10,000 tons. On February 24th, another radio message reached Pearl Harbor. Grayback reported attacking and damaging several enemy vessels, including what might have been a light cruiser. She reported having only 2 torpedoes remaining. The message also included her planned route home. She would proceed through the Okinawa area, then head south through the Philippine Sea toward Midway. Expected arrival at Midway March 7, 1944. That was the last message ever received from USS Grayback. At Pearl Harbor, Submarine Command waited. March 7th came and went. No Grayback. Submarines occasionally ran late, delayed by storms or enemy patrols. So the Navy waited a bit longer. March 10th, March 15th, March 20th. Still no word from Grayback. On March 30th, 1944, the Navy made it official. USS Grayback was presumed lost with all hands. 80 men had vanished beneath the Pacific waves. Western Union telegrams began arriving at homes across America. Each one carried the same devastating message. The Navy Department deeply regrets to inform you. In small towns and big cities, families received the news. Their sons, husbands, brothers were gone, but the telegrams offered no answers. What had happened to Grayback? Had she been sunk in combat, struck a mine, suffered a catastrophic mechanical failure, or perhaps been captured, the crew taken prisoner? The Navy had no idea. Gloria Hurley's husband, torpedoman Raymond Parks, had been aboard Grayback. She received the telegram at her home in Norfolk, Virginia. Her son was barely 3 years old. He would grow up never knowing his father. In Ottumwa, Iowa, the Kofod family learned that their son, Lieutenant William Kofod, was gone. He had been Grayback's executive officer, second in command. Just 28 years old, the Merrill family in Portland, Oregon, lost their youngest son, Seaman Russell Merrill. He was 19 years old. 80 families, 80 stories of loss. Birthdays that would never be celebrated. Children who would never meet their fathers. Dreams that died in the dark waters of the Pacific. But more painful than the loss itself was the not knowing. Where was Grayback? What had happened in her final moments? These questions would haunt the families for decades. After World War II ended, the Navy conducted extensive research into the fate of ships lost during the conflict. They examined captured Japanese records, interviewed prisoners, analyzed war diaries. For many lost submarines, they found answers. Japanese records would reveal the time, place, and manner of sinking. But for Grayback, the records told a confusing story. Japanese documents mentioned an attack on an American submarine. On February 27, 1944, near Okinawa, a Japanese aircraft had spotted a submarine, attacked with bombs, and believed it sunk. The location was recorded as 25 degrees 47 minutes north, 128 degrees 45 minutes east. This seemed to fit with Grayback's reported route home. The Navy concluded that Grayback had probably been sunk on February 27, 1944, in these coordinates. This became the official story. The families now had a date, a location, and a cause of death. It should have brought closure. But something didn't add up. Grayback's last message had been on February 24th. She reported having just 2 torpedoes left. Protocol dictated that submarines return immediately, once their weapons were expended. Why would Grayback still be in the combat zone 3 days later? And the coordinates themselves were puzzling. Over the decades, researchers began to question whether the Navy had the location correct. But without Grayback herself, there was no way to know for certain. The submarine remained missing, lost somewhere in the vast Pacific Ocean. As the years turned to decades, the story of USS Grayback faded from public memory. She became another name on the list of 52 submarines, lost during World War II, still on eternal patrol. The families grew older. Wives became widows, then elderly women. Children who lost fathers grew up, had families of their own. Grandchildren were born who would never meet their grandfathers. But the pain never fully disappeared. Every year on Memorial Day and Veterans Day, family members would gather at memorials. The USS Bofin Submarine Museum in Pearl Harbor, the Submariner Memorial in Groton, Connecticut. They would read the names, including the 80 men of Grayback, and wonder what had happened in those final moments. Some families hired private researchers, hoping to learn more details about their loved one's fate. Others wrote letters to the Navy, asking if new information had been discovered. The answer was always the same: no. By the year 2000, more than half a century had passed. Many of the widows and parents had passed away themselves, without ever learning what truly happened to Grayback. It seemed the mystery would remain unsolved forever. The Pacific Ocean is vast beyond comprehension. Finding a single submarine in those depths would be like finding a needle in a haystack the size of a continent. But technology was advancing, and a new generation of explorers was emerging, people who refused to let these heroes be forgotten. Tim Taylor was not your typical underwater explorer. A former Navy submariner himself, he had served during the Cold War. He understood the unique brotherhood of the submarine service. After leaving the Navy, Taylor founded Lost 52 Project, a private organization dedicated to finding the 52 American submarines lost during World War II. The mission was ambitious, perhaps impossible, but Taylor believed these men deserved to be found. Their families deserved answers. Taylor assembled a team of experts: historians, sonar specialists, deep-sea robotics engineers. They began by re-examining all available historical records. For USS Grayback, they started with the official Navy conclusion that she had been sunk on February 27, 1944, at coordinates 25 degrees 47 minutes north, 128 degrees 45 minutes east. But a researcher named Yutaka Iwasaki made a startling discovery. Iwasaki was reviewing the original Japanese war diary, the one that recorded the attack on the submarine. He noticed something the Navy translators had missed: a single-digit error. The latitude was not 25 degrees 47 minutes. It was 26 degrees 47 minutes. 1 degree of latitude equals about 69 miles. This single-digit error meant the search area had been wrong for 75 years. The Navy had been looking in the wrong place all along. Armed with the corrected coordinates, Tim Taylor's team began planning an expedition to find Grayback. The new search area was still enormous, hundreds of square miles of ocean floor, at depths exceeding 2,400 feet, far too deep for human divers. The team would need to use autonomous underwater vehicles, robots equipped with side-scan sonar. These machines could map the ocean floor in extraordinary detail, revealing objects as small as a few inches across. In June 2019, the Lost 52 team departed for the waters off Okinawa. They carried with them photos of the 80 men who had served aboard Grayback. For Tim Taylor, this was personal. These were his brothers in the submarine service. Separated only by time, day after day the autonomous vehicles descended into the darkness and returned with sonar data. The team analyzed every image, every shadow, searching for the distinctive shape of a submarine. And then on June 5, 2019, they saw it. The sonar image was unmistakable. A submarine sitting upright on the ocean floor, at a depth of 1,427 feet, about 100 miles east-southeast of Okinawa. The submarine's bow was damaged, consistent with a direct bomb hit, but the rest of the hull appeared largely intact. The team sent down a camera-equipped ROV for a closer look. What they saw confirmed it. This was USS Grayback. After 75 years, she had been found. Tim Taylor immediately contacted the U.S. Navy. Then he began the difficult task of notifying the families. Some family members had waited their entire lives for news of their loved ones. Gloria Hurley, whose husband Raymond Parks had been aboard Grayback, received the call at age 91. She had been just 18 when he deployed for the last time. For more than 7 decades, she had wondered. Now finally she knew. John Bean was 18 months old when his father, electrician's mate Lawrence Bean, sailed away on Grayback. He had no memories of his father, only stories his mother told him. Learning that Grayback had been found gave him a connection he had never had before. Mary Bence was the daughter of Lieutenant Commander John Moore, Grayback's captain. She had been just 6 years old when he left. Now in her 80s, she finally had closure. Under U.S. law, military shipwrecks remain the property of the United States government. They are designated as war graves, protected sites that must not be disturbed. USS Grayback would remain where she rests, a memorial on the ocean floor for the 80 men who are still aboard. The Navy confirmed Taylor's discovery and added the precise location to Grayback's official records. Now finally the full story could be told. On February 27, 1944, Grayback was headed home. She had completed a highly successful patrol, sinking 2 cargo vessels and possibly more. Her torpedo tubes were empty. Midway and safety were just days away. But a Japanese Nakajima B-5N carrier bomber spotted the submarine on the surface. The pilot attacked immediately. Grayback's lookouts must have spotted the aircraft. The alarm would have sounded, dive, dive. Men scrambled down the hatches. The diving officer flooded the ballast tanks. Grayback's bow tilted downward as she tried to submerge, but she was too late. The Japanese bomber released a 500-pound bomb. It struck Grayback near the conning tower. The explosion was catastrophic. Water flooded into the pressure hull. USS Grayback sank in less than a minute. Taking all 80 men with her, death would have been quick. At that depth, the crew likely never knew what happened. They died as they had lived, as submariners. Together on eternal patrol, the discovery of Grayback allowed historians to complete her story. Over 10 war patrols, USS Grayback achieved remarkable success. She sank 14 Japanese ships totaling over 60,000 tons, including the destroyer Numikaze and submarine I-18. She damaged at least 8 more vessels. This made her one of the most successful American submarines of World War II. But statistics alone don't tell the full story. Grayback rescued 6 downed airmen from behind enemy lines. Her crew performed an emergency appendectomy while submerged. She helped pioneer American Wolfpack tactics and gathered crucial intelligence on Japanese operations. Commander John Moore was posthumously awarded the Navy Cross for extraordinary heroism during her final patrol. The citation praised his aggressive tactics and his success in penetrating heavily defended waters. Grayback herself received 8 battle stars, each representing a major campaign. Pearl Harbor, the Solomon Islands, the China Sea. She had fought across the entire Pacific theater, The 80 men who died aboard Grayback represented the very best of the silent service. Volunteers who chose the most dangerous duty. Young men who gave everything for their country. Every man aboard USS Grayback had a story. Lieutenant Commander John Anderson Moore, age 34. The captain from Middleton, Ohio, a Naval Academy graduate who had served in submarines since 1934. He left behind a wife and 2 young daughters. Lieutenant William Joseph Kofod, age 28. The executive officer from Ottumwa, Iowa, also a Naval Academy graduate, class of 1938. His wife would never remarry. Chief Torpedoman Raymond Parks, age 27, from Norfolk, Virginia. He left behind his wife Gloria and their 3-year-old son. Chief Electrician's mate Lawrence Justin Bean, age 26, from Hopewell, Pennsylvania. His son John was 18 months old when he sailed away. Seaman First Class Russell Warren Merrill, age 19, the youngest man aboard, from Portland, Oregon. He had joined the Navy right out of high school. His parents would wait by their window every day, hoping for news that never came. These 5 men and 75 others, cooks, electricians, torpedomen, enginemen, radiomen, gunners, and machinists. Each one a son, many were husbands and fathers. They were the heart of USS Grayback, and they will remain forever young, forever on patrol beneath the waves. For the families, the discovery brought a mix of emotions, relief that the mystery was finally solved, sorrow renewed by the confirmation of loss, but most of all a sense of peace. Gloria Hurley, who had waited 75 years, said simply, "Now I know where he is." Mary Bentz, daughter of Captain Moore, expressed gratitude to Tim Taylor and his team for their dedication. John Bean said the discovery gave him a connection to the father he never knew. The Navy held a ceremony at Pearl Harbor, honoring the crew of USS Grayback. Current submariners stood in silence, paying tribute to their predecessors. The submarine service takes care of its own. Even across 75 years, Tim Taylor and the Lost 52 Project continue their work, searching for the other submarines still missing. Inspired by the success of finding Grayback, they are determined that every lost submariner will eventually be accounted for. Conclusion: Eternal Patrol. USS Grayback, SS-208, now rests in peace, 427 feet beneath the Pacific Ocean. Her crew remains at their posts, forever on eternal patrol. Her story reminds us of the price of freedom, the courage of ordinary men in extraordinary times, and the power of persistence to bring closure, even after 3/4 of a century. In the words of the submarine service, we remember those on eternal patrol. We honor their sacrifice, and we will never forget. To the 80 men of USS Grayback, thank you for your service. May you rest in peace.